So we're going to talk about basic color correction. Now there are two terms that kind of float around. One is called color correction, the other one is called color grading. And depending on who you talk to, these terms may be used kind of interchangeably. But when I'm talking to you, we're using the term color correction to fix issues with footage, and we're using color grading to add style or make things look, maybe we want things to look blue or pink or purple or whatever. But color correction is simply about fixing the footage before we go ahead and do color grading so that we can apply that color grade to a whole bunch of different clips without them looking weird.
Now, when it comes to simple color correction, one of the first things that you want to focus on is fixing white balance issues between clips, because then when you go to apply styles across a whole selection of clips, if there are differences in the white balance, it's going to really show up pretty drastically. So I have a clip here from a video that I made a while ago, and if you watch it, it looks okay, but in fact there is a little bit of a hint of yellow-green, which is not so great. So what we are going to do is we're going to use a tool called the Vectorscope to figure out quite what that cast is. Now, it's important to remember that when you're looking at this sort of stuff, especially if you've been editing for a while, it's very easy for your eyes to adjust. Your eyes adjust naturally to pick up whatever white is supposed to be, and so you may not catch things right away. But we're going to go ahead and open up the Vectorscope, and this is show video scopes, and you see here this actually plots out a color wheel of all of the pixels in this individual frame. So you've got reds up here and magentas and blues and cyans and greens and yellows, and you see most of this is kind of in between here in the red and yellow bit. There's also a line here, and this is called the bloodline. Now this is helpful because most skin should land somewhere along this line, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of the brightness. The real color is the human blood that's just kind of modified in terms of brightness by the skin that's on top of it. So this can be a very helpful reference point when you're trying to figure out what color should this be. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to show you kind of the basic color tool in Final Cut Pro, and I'm sure there are equivalents that you can look at in whatever editing software you're using. And what we have here is there's a basic color tab, and what I can do here is I can kind of pick this up and drag this around, and this is kind of editing global colors. And I'm just giving this whole thing a tint, and you'll see the Vectorscope is actually moving around to reflect those changes. And what would be helpful though is if we could isolate just the skin on my face. That way we can know where exactly that falls on the Vectorscope. So we're going to do just that with the crop tool. And don't worry, this is only temporary. I will have my face restored in no time. We're going to just go ahead and trim this up and bring this down. So I'm just isolating a patch of my skin, and it doesn't need to be very large. We're just trying to look at where the pixels fall when we take a look at the Vectorscope. So I close that up, open up the Vectorscope again, and if we go over to the color tab, we see here it's skewing a little bit yellow off of where that bloodline is. We ideally want this to land somewhere close to that bloodline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this global thing, and you see, again, if we move this around, we can change that color of skin. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of estimate just so that we can get it right about nearby. Let's see, move, say right about there. And now you see the plot of these pixels are right along that bloodline, and if we move out of here, out of our color adjustment, and take the crop off, you'll see things look a little bit different. They may seem rather blue to you, but that is because you've been staring at the previous version. So if we turn this color correction off, you see that the original version actually has a bit of a yellow cast to it. If we toggle that back and forth, you can see that there's a bit of an issue. Now, of course, it could be that we've overcorrected a tiny little bit. It'd be also helpful to kind of take a look at this white and take a look at this black and see, is there a little bit of a color cast there? And then you can kind of refine your correction. Now, sometimes you have gotten a clip from somebody else and you don't know what the colors are supposed to be. In this case, this is a clip from Random Little Nikki, who was kind enough to do a clip for me while I was away. And unfortunately, her skin tone is a little bit washed out. It's going to be hard for me to pull a good reference point off of that. But, and complicating the matters, I am not familiar with the background here, so I can't say definitively that this wall that she is in front of is white. So what are we to do? Well, in this case, we're actually going to go ahead and pull a key off of this shirt, because I'm reasonably certain that this shirt is black. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. We'll grab the crop tool, and we will select her shoulder. Often it's helpful to find a frame that has the largest amount of the thing that you are trying to find. trying to use as a reference point. We'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to show you one additional trick. And this can be very helpful if you're really having trouble kind of refining that key or figuring out where that color is. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to bump the saturation all the way up to 100. Now, if I were to take the crop off, you'd see this looks absolutely disgusting. We're not going to leave it that way. But what it does mean is that this Vectorscope goes absolutely nuts because all of the colors are amplified. You see, it just shrinks, or it expands the thing all the way up. So I'm going to leave that there for the moment. Turn the crop back on. There we go. And now you can see that this black shirt actually has a bit of a magenta cast to it. So that actually helps us figure out where exactly this is incorrectly saturated. So I'm going to move this global over to magenta and just pull this in, because black and white or gray, as long as it's something that shouldn't have an actual color, you want it to be right in the center there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down just a tiny little bit. Now, of course, don't forget to pull the saturation back down to 0 so that things don't look too wonky. And now you see that dot is really close to being right in the center there, which is just what we want. We pull the crop off, and if we take a look at that, we can obviously do some sharpening and everything, but there's no longer a color cast that doesn't need to be there. Oops. So let's go ahead and take a look at it without this correction, and back with it on. What we can see is that there's actually just a hint of magenta in there that really shouldn't have been. So we can go ahead and easily take that out, and then we are set to go and do future color grading things with all of our great clips.